There we go. Ready? We'll call to order this meeting of the Tree Advisory Commission meeting, September 1, 2022. We'll start with roll call. Welcome guests. And we'll start with roll call on our left. Joe?
Joe Sadam, City Engineer.
Derek Nelson, New York Public Utilities.
Tom Romaine, Commissioner.
Greg Dearson, Commissioner.
Arlen Body, Commissioner.
Paul Eglund, Commissioner.
Look for approval of the agenda for today.
So moved.
I'll second that.
Motion and second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Agenda approved. Then we'll ask for a motion to approve the minutes from July 2022.
Move to accept the July 7th, 2022 minutes.
I'll second that motion.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the minutes, Paul? All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Motion, any opposed, same. Otherwise, motion passes. Into the old business, 2022 city reimbursement programs and budget update. Joe Stadheim.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. We had a busy couple months, as you can see from the reimbursements. A lot of plantings, a lot of EAB removals. Our total budget amount for 2022 was $10,312.24, and we have expenses at $3,795.84, with an unused amount of about $6,500 left for removal and boulevard reimbursements. Still have plenty of money for people to submit for reimbursements, and hopefully we get some more this fall.
Any questions for Joe?
Not particularly for Joe, but I'm wondering if the expenses of $766.50 for printing and pamphlet expenses, does that include both of the public utilities inserts, or just the April one?
I believe that would be both.
Pardon me?
I'm guessing that's both.
Okay, that seems low, but okay.
They're down below, separated. Keep going.
Oh,
On page 2.
Yep. Oh, amazing. Sorry.
No, good question. And we want that, this one especially, the last one, hopefully that ticks up or increases some of that use of that reimbursement program. So utilize those funds. Any other questions for Joe? Otherwise, we'll go 5.2. PUC update, Derek Nelson.
Good afternoon. The utilities does not have any update on their end. And also, we did not have an Energy Awareness Commission meeting the other month. So there's no update on the green subsidies that I've talked to you about. But I think, see, 2 weeks we'll have an Energy Awareness Commission meeting. So I may discuss with them coming directly to the Tree Advisory Commission if it has anything to do with ultimate things maybe you should be considering or taking action on. So I guess that would be my update currently.
Okay. Any other questions? Any questions for Derek? Otherwise, to 5.3, Emerald Ash Borer EAB update. Joe, this goes to you today.
Yep. Mr. Chair, Commission members, I have no update this month. We're at the same status quo from last month and waiting for the contractor to come to town. So.
Then 5.4, the University of Minnesota's Cover It Up program and Conservation Corps crew Jordy Veit is here today. We'll welcome him.
All right, good afternoon. Jordy Veit, 1400 North Garden Street, New Ulm. So just the fall update for the Cover It Up program. This is the third year that we have taken measurements after the project was set up. I'll talk a bit more about that at the end. Just the usual, these were the types of things that we go through for the data, looking at the understory cover, taking various photos, which they use for estimating through some computer software the amount of daylight that reaches those seedlings, and then assess the growth of our test buckthorn seedlings, and then of course submit the data to them. Some of the stuff, there was definitely overall a lot more vegetation growth this year, but we did have more precip than last year, if I remember correctly, so that probably played into that. So the amount of the bare ground, leaf litter, that type of stuff actually decreased from last year, so we had more cover in the plots. And that's across the whole site, both seeded and non-seeded. So remember, 3 of the squares are seeded with the native seed mixes. 3 of them were left unseeded. All 6 of them contain test buckthorn seeds that we're measuring for growth. As far as like the grasses, they were very similar in growth to last year. The only other thing, the broadleaf plants, the growth of those did increase as well. The one side of the site, which contains square 1 and 3, that'd be kind of the southerly end. Garlic mustard is moving pretty intensively into that end. So that is also kind of increasing some of our growth from last year. As far as the buckthorn growth, there was increase in both germination and growth, mainly in the unseeded plots. There was some couple new buckthorn that grew in the seeded plots, but otherwise all the new germinations actually showed up within the unseeded plants, or unseeded plots, excuse me. And obviously those did not decrease at all with those. So kind of looking at some numbers, the germination of these buckthorn seeds that we were following is now at just under 31%, so that's a little increase from last year. The height increased of our buckthorn growth, again, probably 60-70% of that amount that it increased was actually in the non-seeded plots, but it did grow in both of them. Average number of leaves, that's just another thing that they have assessed that also increased, but if the buckthorn's growing, you're gonna increase that number. Non-seeded areas, just under 56% of our test buckthorn germinated in those. The average height of those was 5.7 inches, which was again up from last year. The average number of leaves also increased in our non-seeded as well. So the germination in the number of leaves for the non-seeded plots is a bit higher than the seeded. The average height is very close, but it is a little bit taller in the non-seeded plots as well. So just a few pictures of some of the plots. You have plot 1 there, and I also believe the next one, yeah, plot 1 and plot 2. That's just kind of looking down over the plots. The flags, you can kind of see the outline of where the plots are. Plot 1 is a seeded one. Plot 2 is unseeded. There's a lot of kind of vegetation there, so you can't see all the flags for plot 1, but just kind of gives you an overview of that. 3 and 4, again, just some pictures there. Again, last year there would have been a lot more bare ground in these compared to what we are seeing this time. And then 5 and 6 as well to round that off. The white flags that you can see, they are actually in all the plots. It's just you can't see them in all of them with the other vegetation in there. That is just marking the test buckthorn that we are measuring for the experiment. So each plot actually has 2 white flags with buckthorn that was planted around it. But again, you can't see that in all of them because of the growth. Just in case you're curious, this is some examples of the fisheye photos that are at eye level looking up. and that's what they use to estimate the amount of light coming through so that they can be able to kind of track that at each of the sites. And then these are looking up from the ground as well. So I just put a few of them in here. There's actually 24 of them total. But they, again, use that to estimate the amount of light that is getting down to those buckthorn. So this was just one other one that I put in there, just kind of an overall picture of the site. So you can see kind of the thicker vegetation, more dense vegetation coming up this year than there was compared to last year. And again, just a couple other pictures in there that are kind of looking at some of the plots. These were a little bit earlier in the season, so this was before the data was collected. I believe about the end of May is when I took these. And then those are some of the grasses that are coming up in the plots. They kind of get lost in amongst all the other ones until you look close. But some of our seeded grasses are coming up in those plots. This hasn't changed. I actually looked at this last year, but these were some of the other plants that were on the site that I identified from last year as well. So that's all I have, unless you have questions. One other thing, this year was originally the last year of the project that they originally had funding for. They are in the process of applying for funding. They have actually applied and are hoping to hear back at the end of September, beginning of October. So there is a chance that this can continue on. I am planning on still continuing on if that's okay with the tree commission. So I just wanted to put that out there and wanted to know what your thoughts are. And if it's okay to continue on, then I'll just continue on with my updates with you, and else I'm directed that you want something different. So I just wanted to put that out there and see what your thoughts were. That and any questions.
I have a couple.
Okay.
On slide 9,
Okay.
and I have been semi-asleep here anyway, but what do the colors indicate on the additional species on site?
Oh, let me go back there. I was trying to figure out which one that was because I didn't have them numbered very well. The colors, the purple ones were some of the ones that were in our seed mix. Okay. And the blue ones were just other ones that I was going to look some more information up on at one point. Otherwise, that was just the color coding on them. But yeah, the purple ones are some of the ones that were actually in the seed mix. So, yep.
How much of the cover on these sites is green ash?
As far as my site, there is, let's see, I know there's one towards the trail. There's probably 2 for sure, green ash. There might be a third one. I'm trying to remember for sure. One of them is a little bit smaller. That's kind of more on the bike, closer to the bike trail. The other one that's back a little further, that's a fairly big one.
Just wondering if, a lot of the stuff that was planted is shade intolerant. So
Yep.
If the green ash goes out of the canopy, maybe there's a better opportunity.
Yeah,
for some of
and I know we'll see when they run the numbers, but I think the amount of light, I mean, it's still fairly shaded, but compared to last year is probably going to be more because the one green ash had a fairly decent sized branch that must have come down at some point that's laying off to the side. It didn't come down on the plot. But we'll see once they run it through the software if that's increased it. But I know across the state with the project, they have a fairly wide variety of sites that go from more sunlight to more shaded. Some of the pictures I've seen from the more sunlight has definitely helped some of the species grow. Also, some of the other species that were in the seed mix, some of those, as far as germination rate, have probably, depending on conditions, a couple years before they would probably typically germinate as well. So I think it'd be good if they get the funding to continue on to be able to follow it for a bit longer. Yep.
And is the young buckthorn, is that coming from seed or is that coming from sprouting?
It's coming from seed. Yep.
Right.
Yep. And those were intentionally planted at the time to make sure that we had the same amount in each plot to grow. So otherwise, the other ones we're cutting down that are outside of that, just so that those are not being counted in there at the time. But there has actually, as far as the seeded plots, I have, because every couple months during the summer, we cut our non-test buckthorn out. The seeded plots, I have taken very little out. I have taken some buckthorn out that's been outside of the plots and in some of the non-seeded, some of which you can tell is sprouted from what was there before. But otherwise, it's been relatively little buckthorn taken out. So the seeded ones, when the project ends, then those will get taken out. But as long as the project goes, those will stay in there because that's what we're measuring. So.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Jordy?
Okay, I'm new, and so when you seeded these plots originally, did you do, what kind of control? Was the area afflicted with buckthorn to start with?
Yes, it was an area that had been previously cleaned out from
So you
buckthorn.
cleaned the buckthorn out, the shrubs,
Yep,
so it had been subject to natural seeding before you got to it,
yes.
and you added additional buckthorn.
Yep. There was 6 seeds at each flag that they put in.
Okay.
And those were the ones that were following through the experiment for germination and growth. So, yeah. And I believe the site would have been mostly cleared about a year out, probably before the project started, is when the site was originally cleaned. And then when the project was set up, we went back through and cleaned everything in about a 30 by 50
You
area.
treated the stumps that were left from the removed
They would have
buckthorn?
been before the project started, yep.
Yeah, but they were killed.
Yep, the
But
stumps were.
the seed bank of buckthorn that was in the site is still there.
Yep, we did not do anything.
So are you
with
monitoring to see if you're getting additional ingrowth from that?
that. They are not, as far as measuring it, no. But I can definitely tell, especially this year, there has been some of that. So, yeah. Not as much as I expected for there to be at the moment, but, given time, I'm sure there'll be a lot more that would still come up in there.
Are you going to manage with fire, or what is your intent? Or
No.
Are you just observing
It's
the
just,
seed
this is
progression,
observing, yeah,
of
yep,
seedling
so,
growth?
yep. And after the project was set up, then there's no chemical treatment used in that 30 by 50 area, so,
Okay.
yep. So everything, all the young buckthorn that's coming up that we want cut outside of that area to not influence, we either have to cut or hand pull, so. Other questions?
Can you remind us how many covered up program sites there are statewide about?
Statewide, about 70 or 80, might be a little bit closer to 100. Yeah. Yep, and they were spread out. Central Minnesota probably had the most, but there's definitely some in northern Minnesota. There's a few others, southern Minnesota, Rochester area, some around the Twin Cities. Twin Cities area is where I think they first started the program. That was the first round where the U of M used different plots to pick out different seed mixes at that time. So.
Thanks, Jordy. There's the suggestion on the agenda.
I would move the motion as printed in the agenda,
We have a second to
as
support?
to do, not to continue.
Okay.
I would second that motion to continue.
We have a motion and a second to, if the funding is extended for this program by the U of M, we do want Jordy to continue this work as he is willing. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Same. So we thank you, Jordy, and appreciate this information. And it sounds like the intention is to continue it. Certainly, it kind of begs to be followed, that seed bank, over the next few years. So, and the location of that is, you say it, you'll say it better than I do. South Market Park.
Kind of. It's probably a little bit closer to the 7th south end of the bike trail.
But you can see it off the bike walk trail.
Yeah, yep. It would be, if you're headed south, it'd be on the right side, same side as the Ridgeway on German,
Okay.
and just kind of down pretty much right in that area. So
Near the sitting bench that's located on the trail.
Okay.
yeah, there you go. I knew there was something else there.
So if you take that, you'll be able to see those flags. Okay. 5.5, the utility billing informational inserts. I don't know if this is Derek. The August 22 is done. Any future thoughts for an insert?
Well, the next one would be next June or April. You know, there's always a few months that they're kind of just out there. So if the Tree Advisory Commission wants to do something in winter to prep for the next season, or just something informative in general, you know, there's January, February, May, and December are usually open. Somebody might sneak in there and grab it for something else, but there's nothing set in stone for those months as far as I recall. So that's something that if there's an idea that pops up, we can discuss that.
Even if there is something bookmarked for one of those months, we can do 2 stuffers now.
Yes, that's right.
So-
Yep. Yeah, which is something over this is the last year or so they've
Yeah.
been able to do that. In years past, the billing stuffer machine could only handle really one billing insert. So, yeah. So if there's really any month, we can probably work that out, depending on who else has something going in. So just can keep that in the back of your mind.
It would seem reasonable in April to say you need to water your trees this summer, especially in May, June, and July, so that they get them watered in time rather than let them brown up and die before they think they can get the hose out. So that.
And of course, you don't always have to. You can use the billing stuffers. You have dates set aside for this commission, but there's also the city has Facebook page. We have the website that has the capability of putting something on the website and sending it out to people that have signed up for notifications, and it could be sent out in the form of an email and or a text message to them. If it's just some random informative items you want out. So all things to keep in mind. There's other ways to communicate with the community besides the billing stuffer. So.
Thank you. 5.6, the Big Tree Contest. The deadline is extended, 6 p.m. Friday, September 16. One entry as of today. But we need someone who will measure, assuming there's a second tree, or to verify that that tree is,
I would be willing to do that.
you're willing.
Yes.
Anyone else willing?
I will help with that again, like.
All right.
Okay.
Tom and Arlen volunteered. All right.
Anybody else, they're welcome to call.
Okay. If there's only one tree, maybe.
You gonna make an afternoon of it? One tree.
Somebody will come forth maybe now that those hickory nuts have started to drop. Maybe it'll be easier to find the tree.
I'm surprised it's not the one that I know of, so
We'll see.
I'm not gonna give away the location.
It's not in the buckthorn plots. So we know. All right, thank you, gentlemen. 5.7, invasive species management. Tom, this is yours to kind of take us through.
Well, we are, just for the sake of Paul, is that we've kind of put this invasive species management proposal for the city last winter or the winter before. We've been kicking it around for a while, and there were kind of 6 steps to this, and we're about on step 2.5, which is determine which city of New Ulm entities administer land and delineate those lands. This is, the ink is still wet on this, but this is the city of New Ulm, and the colors indicate different city entities that manage land within the city, and not all of it is vegetated. So we asked Soren to put this together for us, and it's a base map of vegetation cover, and we can figure out which places need to be visited and which pieces really don't need to be visited. So, like this big thing here is the airport, and that's either it's paved or it's mowed, so it's not one that we really need to go look at. So anyway, we just got this afternoon, and if anybody is interested in tromping through the woods and the grasslands around the city, I would be more than willing to walk around there with you. And what we are going to look at is something we probably need to decide on. So when I sent out those lists, the Department of Agriculture 2022 noxious weed list, and these are covered by statutes. As there's a list of 16 species that are supposed to be eradicated, another 13 species that are supposed to be controlled to prevent the maturation and spread of propagating parts, and then the third list is restricted, may not be sold, transported illegally, or intentionally planted in Minnesota. And then the Department of Natural Resources has a list of invasive plants and how to identify and manage them, and there's quite a list of flowering plants, trees and shrubs and vines. And my questions to my fellow commissioners is, how deep do we want to get into these lists? You know, do we want to just concentrate on the eradicate and prohibited control? And you know, the city is not in the business of selling, transporting, or intentionally planting invasive species or noxious plants in the city, so I don't know that we need to deal with that issue very much. Or do we want to get into these invasive plants other than when we get down to the end of the list and we're talking about public outreach, which we're already starting to do with invasive species. We've had some utility inserts talking about invasive species in the past, and we could certainly do that again. So, and then if somebody has a better eye for these species, I'm familiar with some, but not all of them, and I don't think that all of them are here in town. So I hope they aren't all here in town.
I wouldn't bet a lot of money on it.
So I would kind of throw this all open on the table for discussion if that meets with the approval of the chair.
I can help ID species.
Pardon me?
I have some information in my head, so.
Yeah, there's, you know, on the, and counties can have a noxious weed list, but I Googled on the MDA site, the Department of Agriculture site, and Brown County does not have any noxious weeds listed separately from the Department of Agriculture and the Department of Natural Resources. But the DNR site has links and and guides to how to to recognize the species and then to manage them. So I think we can work with, there's overlap between the two sets.
So
of lists.
basically, we're looking at starting a program to try to get out there and take care of this problem, or just identify
Well,
it?
what we had talked with is, you know, we're at that, we've got it mapped now, so we can figure out what we have to look at. And
Yep.
we need to wander around on that stuff and in some sort of systematic way of covering it. And then once we've kind of see what problem we think that there is, then the fourth step was to develop a response program and try to find funds to manage the infestations. And the fifth step was to develop a public information outreach program to encourage and enable non-city land administrators to manage infestations of invasive vegetation species. And 6 was to look for funding source to cost share with the non-city land administrator. So, you know, we can't take, at this point, we really can't take city funds and do work on private land. You know, besides funding, perhaps some private landowners may be interested in doing this just out of their own goodness, and some people may be willing to volunteer to help other landowners control invasive. That's down the road yet.
I would go with you, but I'm gone a lot. The only problem is, I would go with you to inspect some property if you want
Okay,
to. I
well,
need some
I'll
plans.
keep that in mind.
I'd be available for that also,
Yeah,
so.
that would be good. You know, I have some ideas of what we're gonna find, so it's,
Like garlic mustard.
we should probably have a work session sometime, and since it's a city commission, we have to work through the process of work session. Not to be open, but to determine which sites we're gonna look at and when.
But to start to pick out a couple locations and maybe catalog a couple of communities or types of invasives that are in those locations. Catch a hot spot or two.
Well, we'll see what we find.
Yeah. Okay. So informally, we'll agree to do that, and I'll let Tom work on basically a work day, because I think all of us are interested in and able to identify some of these. So
So, you know, reed canary grass is on the DNR list, and I can, I can guarantee that there's hundreds of acres of city land in the river bottoms that are probably invested with reed canary grass.
Did you have a proposed solution?
It's a persistent, thank you, Soil Conservation Service.
well, and there's also that decision about what we can tackle and what's going to be within our means. So
Well, you know, some of this stuff lends to being, you know, if you start out with a noxious weed list, that's fairly limited. When you get to the DNR list, it's pretty extensive. And some of the species are, what's the term I'm looking for? They've almost, they're not native species, but they're part of our
naturalized.
environment right now because they've filled the niche. And how much are we going to be able to garden, in essence, all of the city lands and the private lands in the city, which seem to be I would say that the noxious weeds are probably the most serious things we have to deal with, and the invasive plants, we'll have to look at what a problem they
Pose.
You know, the other thing in here that I know that there's a ton of, and New Ulm is leafy spurge and crown vetch, and Creeping Charlie and Queen's Anne's Lace.
So we're working on
Yes.
number 3, that inventory, the amount
Yep.
and location of invasive vegetation. Okay. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome.
5.8, tree pruning workshop in late autumn. Tom is working on that. He's got some info from Jeff.
Paul gave me a list of topics for the morning session and the afternoon, and I also got some input from Jeff Huffman, and I need to bring that back to Ryan Murphy. We have a site, I keep calling it the senior center.
Oh, the community center.
Community center. I can't keep the community center and the recreation center and the civic center separate in my head, so. But Jeff made arrangements for that site on October 12th, and I need to be working with Ryan Murphy from Forestry Extension at the university. And we'll go from there. I don't have any kind of an estimate on what they might charge us for it, but there seems to be enough left in our budget that we can pay for it.
Yep.
So fortunately, Jeff's Huffman and Paul's list are meshing.
Yeah, thank you for that list, Paul.
Okay.
That's my report.
Thank you. We'll move to new business, and 6.1 is an information item. The city, through the Park and Rec Department, maintains an annual membership with the Arbor Day Foundation, and the Tree City USA program is administered by them. Many other tree resources are available from them, and Tom sends us via email some of that information throughout the year. No action necessary, it's just an update that we maintain that. Any thoughts, comments regarding? Okay. Any other new business?
No.
Then 7.1, the date of our next meeting for 2022, our last one for the year, November 3rd, 4 p.m. here in the City Hall Council Chambers. And the dates for 2023 are listed. A reminder to email agenda items to the Park and Rec Director 1 week prior. With no further business, Chairperson declares the meeting adjourned.